Imagine being 18 years old, stepping onto the biggest stage in tennis, and somehow making the entire world stop and stare. That's exactly what Alex Eala did. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to beat Grand Slam champions. She wasn't supposed to make history. But she did all of that and more. And just when it felt like a fairy tale was writing itself in real time, it all came crashing down in a way nobody could have predicted. Not her coaches. Not the fans who had fallen in love with her game. Not even her opponents. This story isn't just about tennis. It's about pressure, about the weight of a nation's expectations, and about what happens when a dream gets so close you can taste it, only to slip away in the most heartbreaking way possible. What you're about to hear is a story of triumph, of heartbreak, and of a young woman who carried an entire country on her shoulders while barely old enough to vote. This is the story of Alex Eala's dream run. And trust me, you are not ready for how it ends. The tennis world has a way of producing unexpected heroes. Every few years, a new face emerges from the shadows, someone nobody was talking about, and suddenly they're beating legends and rewriting history books. In March of 2026, that someone was Alex Eala, an 18-year-old left-hander from the Philippines who had been flying under the radar for most of her young career. But that was about to change in the most dramatic way possible: Miami. The Miami Open, one of the biggest tournaments in the world. The kind of event where the biggest names in tennis gather to battle it out under the Florida sun. The crowds are massive. The prize money is life-changing. And the pressure is absolutely suffocating. For most young players, just qualifying for a tournament like this would be considered a massive achievement. But Alex Eala wasn't most young players. Before Miami, Eala had been climbing the ranks slowly but surely. She turned professional at just 16, which is incredibly young in tennis terms. She had some success on the junior circuit, winning the Junior French Open doubles title and even reaching the junior singles semifinals at the US Open. But the professional tour is a completely different beast. It's ruthless, it's unforgiving, and it has a way of chewing up young players and spitting them out before they even have a chance to figure out who they are. Yet there was something different about Eala. She had this calmness about her that seemed almost unnatural for someone her age. On the court, she moved with a grace and intelligence that made her look like she had been playing on the big stage for a decade. Off the court, she carried herself with a maturity that surprised everyone who met her. She was thoughtful, well-spoken, and seemed completely unfazed by the spotlight that was slowly beginning to find her. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen in Miami. The draw came out, and when players and fans looked at it, they saw the usual suspects. The top seeds, the Grand Slam champions, the familiar faces that tennis fans have grown to know and love. And then there was Alex Eala's name, quietly sitting there in the bracket, waiting for her chance. Nobody expected much from her. Let's be honest, she was a wild-card entry, a young player from a country that doesn't exactly have a rich history in tennis. The Philippines had produced some talented players over the years, but nobody who had ever made a real dent on the global stage. So when Eala stepped onto the court for her first match, the expectations were low. The crowds were small. The attention was minimal. Something happened. Something that would send shockwaves through the tennis world that started winning. Not just winning, but dominating. Her first-round match was against a solid, experienced opponent, a player who had been on the tour for years and knew all the tricks. Eala made her look ordinary. The left-handed forehand that had become her signature weapon was firing on all cylinders. Her movement was sharp. Her decision-making was flawless. She didn't just beat her opponent. She made a statement, and with each win, the crowds grew a little bigger. The whispers grew a little louder. The attention started to shift. Tennis fans love an underdog story. They love watching someone come out of nowhere and shake up the establishment. And here was this 18-year-old kid from the Philippines, doing exactly that. By the time she reached the second round, people were starting to take notice. The American audience, the same people who had never heard of Alex Eala a week earlier, were suddenly curious about this young star. Who was she? Where did she come from? And could she actually keep this going? The answer to that question would come soon enough. And when it did, nobody could have predicted just how far this dream run would go. But the real challenge was just beginning. Because the deeper you go in a tournament like the Miami Open, the harder the opponents get. The pressure intensifies. The stakes become higher. And for a young player who had never been in this position before, it would take something truly special to keep the momentum going. Eala was about to face her biggest test yet, and how she responded would either make her a household name or send her back to the practice courts wondering what could have been. But before we get to what happened next, we need to understand something about this young woman. We need to understand her journey, her sacrifices, and why this moment meant so much more than just tennis. Eala wasn't just playing for herself. She was playing for an entire country. She was playing for every young kid in the Philippines who had ever dreamed of making it big. She was playing for a nation that had been waiting for someone like her to come along. And that weight, that incredible, suffocating weight of expectation, was something she would have to carry with every single point she played. And as the world was about to find out, she carried it better than anyone could have ever imagined. To understand just how monumental this run was, you have to go back a year. Because the Alex Eala who stepped onto the court in Miami in 2026 was not the same player who had captured the world's attention just 12 months earlier. That first breakthrough, the one in 2025, had been nothing short of miraculous. She was ranked 140th in the world, a complete unknown, a wild-card entry who had no business being in the same conversation as the sport's biggest names. And then she went out and beat 3 Grand Slam champions in a single tournament. 3 of them: Yelena Ostapenko, the 2017 French Open winner; Madison Keys, fresh off her Australian Open triumph; and then Iga Swiatek, the world number 2, a 5-time major winner who had been dominating the sport for years that didn't just beat them. She made them look ordinary. That run in 2025 took her all the way to the semifinals, where she finally fell to Jessica Pegula. But by then, the damage was done. Alex Eala was no longer a secret. She had become a phenomenon, the first Filipina to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal, the first to break into the top 100, and later the first to crack the top 50. The Philippines had never seen anything like her, and the expectations, which had been non-existent just weeks earlier, were now enormous. A nation of over 100 million people had found their new sporting hero. She was the face of Filipino tennis, the one who had finally broken through. And so when the 2026 Miami Open arrived, the attention was different. The spotlight was brighter. She was no longer the underdog who could play without pressure. She was the player everyone was watching, the one who had to prove that her incredible run a year earlier wasn't just a fluke. The weight of that was immense. For an 18-year-old, it would have been suffocating. But Eala wasn't just any 18-year-old. She had been preparing for this her entire life. Born in Quezon City, she started playing tennis at the age of 4, and by 12, she had moved to Spain to train at the prestigious Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca. Think about that for a second. At an age when most kids are worrying about homework and school dances, she was thousands of miles from home, dedicating herself to the sport she loved. Her mother, a former swimming medalist herself, had instilled in her a discipline that would carry her through the toughest moments. Her father and her brother, both athletes in their own right, understood the sacrifices it took to reach the top. And by the time she graduated from the Nadal Academy in 2023, with Rafa himself handing her the diploma, she had the skills and the mental toughness to compete with the best in the world. But the 2026 tournament was a different beast entirely. She entered as the 31st seed, a massive jump from the wild card she had been a year earlier. She was no longer an unknown. She was a marked woman, a target. Every opponent she faced would be ready for her. They would study her game, exploit her weaknesses, and try to break her down. And her most glaring weakness, as many analysts had pointed out, was her serve. It was a weapon that, when working, could win her free points. But when it wasn't clicking, it left her vulnerable. Her first real test came in the second round against Germany's Laura Siegemund, a veteran player who had been on the tour for years and knew how to make life difficult for younger opponents. Siegemund had already beaten Eala once before, and she had the experience and the patience to push her to the limit. The match lasted over 3 hours. 3 hours of grinding baseline rallies, of momentum swings, of sheer willpower. Eala dropped the first set in a tiebreak, and for a moment, it felt like the dream was already over. But she didn't panic. She regrouped, changed her tactics, and clawed her way back, winning the second set 6-3 and the third set 6-3. It was a grueling test of character, and she passed it. And that's what made this run so different from the one a year earlier. In 2025, she had been playing with house money. Every win was a bonus, a pleasant surprise. But in 2026, She was expected to win. She was the higher-ranked player. The crowd, especially the growing number of Filipino fans in the stands, was cheering for her. The pressure was immense. And yet, she kept finding a way. Her next opponent was Magda Linette, a Polish player who had also beaten Iga Swiatek in the tournament and had a 2-1 head-to-head advantage over Eala. It was a match that, on paper, could have gone either way. The experts were divided on the outcome, with some predicting Linette's experience would prove decisive. But Eala played one of the most composed matches of her career, winning in straight sets, 6-3, 7-6. She was doing it again. She was making another deep run in Miami, and the tennis world was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the year she would go all the way. By the time she reached the round of 16, the speculation was everywhere. Could she actually win the whole thing? Could an 18-year-old from the Philippines, a country with almost no tennis tradition, lift one of the biggest trophies in the sport? The hype was building. The expectations were skyrocketing. And waiting for her in the next round was a Czech player who had not lost a single game in her previous match, a woman who was playing the best tennis of her life. Her name was Karolina Muchova, and she was about to become the most dangerous opponent Alex Eala had ever faced. The stage was set for the most dramatic chapter of this incredible story, and so, after grinding through two of the toughest matches of her young career, Alex Eala found herself standing on the precipice of something truly special. The round of 16, the fourth round of the Miami Open, the same stage where, a year earlier, she had received a walkover that had propelled her toward her historic semifinal run. But this time, there would be no walkover. This time, standing across the net from her was Karolina Muchova, the 13th seed from the Czech Republic, a player who had just won the Qatar Open a month earlier and was playing the best tennis of her life. The tennis world was buzzing. The hype around Eala had reached a fever pitch. She was the number 31 seed now, the world number 29, a player who had proven she belonged on the biggest stages. Filipino fans had packed the stands at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, their flags waving, their voices loud, their hopes riding on every single swing of her racket. This was the kind of moment that made sports so magical. A young woman from a country with no real tennis history, carrying the dreams of 100 million people, facing down a world-class opponent. But here is the thing about sports. Sometimes, the story doesn't follow the script. Sometimes, the fairy tale doesn't get its happy ending. And what happened next was so stunning, so utterly unexpected, that it left everyone watching in complete disbelief. The match lasted exactly 1 hour, 60 minutes from the first serve to the final point. And from the very first game, it was clear that something was terribly wrong. Eala elected to serve first, a sign of confidence, of wanting to set the tone early. But she immediately faced pressure. A double fault, a forehand error. And just like that, her serve was broken. She had been broken in her very first service game. The crowd went quiet, sensing that this was not the start they had been hoping for. And then it got worse. So much worse. Muchova, the former world number 8, was simply unstoppable. She was serving bombs, attacking the net with a confidence that made her look like she was playing a practice match. She was mixing up her shots, drawing Eala in with drop shots, and then finishing her off with precise volleys. It was surgical, clinical, and utterly devastating. Eala could not find her rhythm. Her shots, the ones that had been so sharp against Siegmund and Linette, were suddenly spraying wide. Her movement, usually so graceful, seemed a step slow. She was off, completely off. The first set lasted just 22 minutes. In that time, Muchova conceded only 6 points. 6. Eala did not win a single game. She did not even reach game point until the middle of the second set. The scoreboard read 6-0, and the crowd was in shock. How could this be happening? How could the same player who had beaten 3 Grand Slam champions a year earlier be losing so comprehensively? And here is where the story takes an even more heartbreaking turn. The second set started the same way as the first. Muchova broke Eala again, and again, and again. The score was quickly 4-0. A double bagel, a 6-0, 6-0 defeat, was looking like a very real possibility. The kind of loss that could shake a young player's confidence for months. The kind of loss that makes you question everything. Eala was fighting. She was trying. But she just couldn't get anything going. Her serve, the one aspect of her game that analysts had identified as a weakness, was failing her. Her ground strokes, usually so reliable, were betraying her. And Muchova was making every single shot count, hitting 20 winners to just 11 unforced errors, the kind of ratio that wins matches in a hurry. The second set, 6-0, 6-4. Muchova held her serve to close out the match, sealing a convincing 6-0, 6-2 victory. And in that moment, the dream was over. The dream that had started with a wild card entry in 2025. The dream that had seen her beat Iga Swiatek. The dream that had made her a national hero. It was over. It was over in a way that nobody could have predicted. Eala walked off the court, her head down, her expression a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. The crowd gave her a standing ovation, the Filipino fans chanting her name, trying to lift her spirits. But you could see it in her eyes. This was not how it was supposed to go. This was not the ending the script had promised. And now, we face the question that every athlete in her position must confront. How do you pick yourself up from a defeat like this? How do you find the strength to keep going when the world has just watched you fall so hard? Eala had shown incredible resilience in the past. She had come back from tough losses before. But this one felt different. This one felt like it could define her career. The question wasn't just whether she could bounce back. The question was whether she could ever reach the same heights again. In the minutes after the match ended, the cameras found Alex Eala. She was walking off the court at the Hard Rock Stadium, her head down, her racket bag slung over her shoulder. The crowd, still buzzing from the shock of what they had just witnessed, rose to their feet. Filipino flags waved from the stands. Chants of her name echoed through the stadium. It was a standing ovation, not for a victory, but for a young woman who had given everything she had. But Eala wasn't looking up. She was processing. She was trying to make sense of what had just happened. The match lasted exactly 1 hour, 60 minutes from the first serve to the final point. In tennis terms, that is almost unheard of. Professional matches, even one-sided ones, typically stretch well over an hour. But Muchova was so dominant, so clinical, so utterly unstoppable, that she barely gave Eala time to breathe. The first set lasted just 22 minutes. 22 minutes. In that time, Muchova conceded only 6 points total. 6. Eala did not win a single game. She barely won any points. Her serve, the part of her game that legendary coach Brad Gilbert had pointed out as a weakness, was completely dismantled. Gilbert, who had mentored Andre Agassi and Coco Gauff, had been watching closely, and he took to social media to share his thoughts. He wrote that for someone of Eala's height, especially being a lefty, she needed to dramatically improve her first and second serve. It was a harsh truth, but a necessary one. By the time the second set started, Eala was down a set and trailing 4 games to nothing. A double bagel, a 6-0, 6-0 loss, was looming. And then, finally, something clicked. It happened in the third game of the second set. Eala reached game point for the first time in the entire match. The crowd erupted, hoping for a comeback. But Muchova was not in the mood for drama. She hit a return winner and broke Eala's serve yet again. The score was 6-0, 4-0. The match was effectively over. But here is where we see the heart of a champion. Because even as she was losing, even as everything was going wrong, Eala refused to give up. With Muchova leading 6-0, 4-0, the Filipina held serve for the first time in the match. It was a small victory, a tiny moment of pride, but it mattered. It meant she had avoided the humiliation of a double bagel, a result that would have been devastating for a player of her caliber. She held serve again at 3-5, but it wasn't enough. Muchova served out the match, closing it out with an emphatic smash. Eala walked off the court. She was not the same player who had walked on. She had been beaten, broken down, and exposed in front of the world. But she was also wiser. She was learning. After the match, she spoke to reporters. Her voice was measured, her words thoughtful, her composure almost unsettling. She did not make excuses. She did not blame the pressure. She did not complain about the crowd or the conditions. She simply told the truth. She said that Muchova played really well and that she definitely did not play her best. She admitted that there were details she could have done better, and maybe if she had, the match would have been more competitive. But then she said something remarkable. She said that after a great win, she is not all that good, and after a bad loss, she is not all that bad. It was a moment of pure self-awareness, the kind of perspective that separates the great players from the ones who never quite make it. She was taking the loss, digesting it, and refusing to let it define her. What about the pressure? The expectations? The weight of a nation? Had it finally caught up with her? Eala was asked about that too. She acknowledged that there was definitely a little added pressure at this tournament, but she emphasized that it came more from herself than from anyone else. She said she handled it quite well and that it wasn't such a big deal or a heavy weight, simply because she had done a lot of the work before the tournament even began. She was happy with her progress and the trajectory of her improvement. And then came the moment that showed exactly who Alex Eala is as a person. She talked about what it means to be playing for the Philippines. She said she recognizes that she is fortunate to be living the life she lives, and that she has earned it through hard work. But she also said something else. She said she has witnessed poverty around her, in her surroundings. She doesn't take anything for granted, especially her family, her team, and the opportunities she is lucky to enjoy. It was a reminder that behind the athlete, behind the rankings and the prize money and the fame, there is a young woman who understands exactly how far she has come. She would later post on Instagram, writing, "I can confirm, Miami's still the best. I'll always have a special place in my heart for this tournament." First sunshine double done. It was a simple message, but it spoke volumes. She was hurt, yes. She was disappointed, definitely. But she was also grateful. Grateful for the journey. Grateful for the fans. Grateful for the chance to keep writing her story. But as she packed her bags and prepared to leave Miami, one question lingered in the air. What happens now? How do you move forward from a defeat like this? Eala had dropped from 29th to 45th in the live rankings, losing 270 points from her semifinal run the previous year. The climb back would be steep. The questions would keep coming. And the next chapter of her career, the clay court season, was waiting for her. She was set to compete at the WTA 500 tournament in Linz, Austria, starting in April. It would be her first clay court tournament of the season. A new surface, a new challenge, a new chance to prove that Miami was not the end of the story. In the hours and days that followed that devastating loss, the tennis world didn't just move on. It couldn't, because something had happened in Miami that went far beyond a single match result. The conversation around Alex Eala had shifted. The questions were no longer about whether she could win. They were about how she could grow. And the answers, some brutal and some beautiful, revealed exactly what kind of player and person she truly was. The first voice to speak up was one of the most respected in tennis. Brad Gilbert, the legendary coach who had guided Andre Agassi to 6 Grand Slam titles and helped Coco Gauff win the 2023 U.S. Open, took to social media with a blunt assessment. He had been watching Eala's matches closely, and what he saw in that fourth-round defeat exposed a weakness that had been hiding beneath all those stunning victories. Gilbert didn't sugarcoat it. He wrote that for someone of Eala's height, and especially being a left-handed player, she needs to dramatically improve both her first and second serve. He pointed out that Muchova had been all over her, winning 9 games in a row at one point. But then he said something that revealed the silver lining. He said that her struggles on serve just showed how good the other parts of her game really are. It was a backhanded compliment, but it was also the truth. If Eala could fix her serve, she could become a true force on the tour. The statistics from that match were staggering. Muchova won 80% of her first serve points. Eala won just 39%. On return points, the gap was even wider. Muchova took 64% of first serve return points, while Eala managed only 20%. 20%. In a sport where margins are measured in inches and milliseconds, that is the kind of disparity that explains everything. The serve, the one shot that every player should be able to control, had become Eala's Achilles heel. That here's the thing about sports. A loss like that doesn't just expose weaknesses. It exposes character. And in the moments after the match, when the cameras were still rolling and the microphones were still pointed at her, Eala revealed exactly who she was. She sat in her post-match press conference, her voice steady, her eyes clear, and she said something that would stick with everyone who heard it. She said that after a great win, she's not all that good, and after a bad loss, she's not all that bad. It was a moment of pure perspective. She refused to let the victory define her. She refused to let the defeat destroy her. She was looking at the bigger picture, and that big picture was still incredibly bright. She also made it clear that the pressure of playing for an entire nation was not something that burdened her. She acknowledged there was a little added pressure at this tournament, but she said it came more from herself than from anyone else. She had handled it well. She was happy with her progress. And then she posted on Instagram, writing words that would make every Filipino fan smile. I can confirm, Miami's still the best. I'll always have a special place in my heart for this tournament. First sunshine double done. Simple words. But they spoke volumes about her gratitude. And yet, gratitude alone couldn't stop the math. The rankings don't care about character. They care about points. And when the WTA released its updated rankings, the numbers were brutal. Eala dropped from a career high of number 29 all the way down to number 45. A 16-place slide. 270 points lost. The fairy tale run of 2025 had given her points that she simply couldn't defend in 2026. That's the harsh reality of professional tennis. You don't get to keep what you earned yesterday. You have to earn it all over again, every single year. But the ranking drop wasn't the only statistic that stung. There was another number, one that had been growing quietly in the background. A statistic that nobody had really paid attention to until now. Eala's record against players from the Czech Republic was now 0 wins and 13 losses. 13. It was becoming a pattern. Something about the way Czech players approached matches just seemed to neutralize everything Eala did well. Muchova had been the latest example, but there had been others. Linda Noskova at Indian Wells just a few weeks earlier had handed Eala a similar beating, winning 6-2, 6-0. It was a mental block, a tactical puzzle, and a challenge that Eala would have to solve if she wanted to reach the next level. But the beauty of tennis is that there's always another tournament. There's always another surface. And for Eala, the clay court season was waiting. She was already packing her bags for Europe, her focus shifting from the hard courts of Miami to the sliding, grinding points of the red dirt. Her next stop was the WTA 500 tournament in Linz, Austria, starting in early April. And this time, she wouldn't be going alone. She had a secret weapon, someone who knew more about clay court tennis than almost anyone alive, Tony Nadal. Rafael Nadal's uncle and longtime coach. The man who had guided the greatest clay court player in history to 14 French Open titles. Eala had been training at the Rafa Nadal Academy for years, but now, with the clay season approaching, Tony's involvement in her preparation was becoming more intense. She spoke about him with genuine awe. She said it was fantastic and that she felt truly privileged to have him as part of her team. She said if someone had told her years ago that Tony Nadal would be helping her, she would have thought they were crazy. But there he was, sharing that knowledge, helping her team, bringing all that necessary experience. She said they were a well-oiled machine, a team that got along super well and had good vibes. She had been working on feeling the ball on clay, on improving her movement and agility. She said she felt she was moving better than she had the year before. The work was paying off. The confidence was building. And just when it seemed like the story of her Miami defeat was fading from memory, something else happened. Something that showed just how much this young woman had captured the hearts of people not just in the Philippines, but around the world. A voice from the biggest legend of all reached out to her, and his words carried the weight of an entire nation.